Good evening. Do we have all council members present, Madam Clerk? Don't see the Madam Clerk. I see Member Becerra and Member Gomez. Mayor Pro Tem Irving, are you with us?
I
see
am.
you. Thank you. All right, well, good evening, everyone. Today is Monday, May 9th, 2022. The time is 5 p.m. and a special meeting of the following will come to order. The Victorville Library Board of Trustees, Southern California Logistics Rail Authority, Southern California Logistics Airport Authority, successor agency, the Redevelopment Agency. The city is housing assets successor, Joint Powers Financing Authority. Madam Clerk, will you kindly call the roll?
Councilmember Gomez.
Present.
Councilmember Becerra.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Irving.
Present.
Mayor Jones.
Here.
We have quorum.
All right, thank you. Madam Clerk, is Pastor Gonzalez with us?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Who would like to lead us in prayer? Anyone behind the dais? Mayor Pro Tem? All right, I'll go ahead. If everyone will kindly bow their head, we're going to go ahead with the invocation. That's going to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by our Police Captain, John Wickham. So everyone, if you'll bow your heads if you'd like to, let's pray. Father in heaven, what a glorious day this is. We thank you for the beautiful weather that we have in our high desert. And we thank you for inclining your ear always to our circumstances, to our needs, and that you're always working to polish us up. We ask that you would be with us in this meeting tonight, give us strength and wisdom and courage to make the decisions that you believe are best in the interest of our city. Help us to be the leaders that shine the way you would have us shine. Help us to be the ambassadors to you that we need to be. We pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen. Captain Wickham.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the Republic
States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. All right, Madam Clerk, will you kindly present the agenda and any revisions thereto?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There was a revision to the agenda index to include language regarding AB 361.
Thank you. All right, moving on to conflict of interest declarations. Council members, are there any declarations?
None.
Hearing and seeing none, we're going to go ahead and move on to public comments. Madam Clerk, are there requests to speak either in chambers or via Zoom?
Yes, we do have an in-chamber speaker, Madam Mayor.
All right.
Would you like me to go ahead with calling him up.
Well, everyone, welcome to tonight's meeting of the
Madam Mayor, can you retry that?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, very good. All right. All right, well, everyone, welcome to tonight's meeting of the Victorville City Council. Your council is interested in your ideas and opinions, and furthermore endeavors to incorporate them into its deliberations. At the same time, the council must be able to carry out its business in an organized and efficient manner, free from material disruption. Therefore, this meeting will be administered in accordance with the council's established policies and procedures and Government Code Section 54957.9. All testimony during this special meeting is limited to the item posted on the agenda and must be directed solely to the council. Individual speakers may address the council once during the public comment period for up to 3 minutes. Although open meeting laws do not permit council members to engage in dialogue with any speaker during the public comment period, please know your comments and questions may be taken into consideration by council members when discussing the particular agenda item. The presiding officer may briefly respond or have staff respond to statements or questions, or may request that the staff report back to the council at a subsequent meeting. Speakers are requested to comment as briefly as the subject permits. Individual council members who speak as a member of the public do so without the semblance or presumption of authority derived from her public office and are subject to the same meeting rules of conduct and decorum as other public participants. Once comments are invited, the speaker will be called on by name and recognized by the presiding officer. Excuse me. Public comments this evening must relate directly to item number 1. Audience members may not disrupt, disturb, or otherwise impede the orderly conduct of this meeting. Your understanding and cooperation are appreciated. All right, Madam Clerk.
I have a point of inquiry. So
Yeah.
I want to ask a
We don't
question.
have points of inquiry.
My question is, you said it's only related to one, but I thought we have a revised agenda, which means we can either talk to AB 361 or the workshop, or is that not the case? I'm just seeking clarification.
I have item number 1 on tonight's meeting.
Okay, so we can address, so we're not
Madam
addressing
Clerk,
division?
Our first speaker is Valentin Godina.
thank you.
Yes. Good afternoon, City Council, and thank you, council members that did
Good evening, Mr. Godina. Welcome.
take the time to show up to your emergency meeting. I'm sorry, and it's very unprofessional to see our mayor and pro temp mayor, who were in charge of an emergency meeting, not being here in person, but having us change our schedule, because you cannot coordinate the agendas correctly, and we have to jump and bounce to your tune. That will be coming to an end if this continues, and we will have new people who should be able to run a meeting accordingly to the guidelines. I don't know what the state emergency is, but it made me change my schedule, and here I am. And I hope that this meeting provides something worthwhile so I can be comfortable of changing my schedule. And as you can see, and maybe this is what you were hoping for, nobody's here, because we do not have the flexibility to be on your schedule on a whim.
Dina, I've given you a lot of leeway on this tonight. We're only speaking on item number 1, but I do appreciate your concerns, and that's why I gave you the latitude. Mr. DePortnowski, this was a special meeting posted in accordance with the Brown Act requirements.
That is correct, and it is not an emergency meeting. It's just a special meeting that we have
Correct.
to hold with 24 hours notice.
Correct. And furthermore, council members are always behind the dais except when there are extraordinary circumstances, and they cannot be, and that is the case this evening. if that sets any of them members of the public's minds at ease. All right, Madam Clerk, any other requests from chambers?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Blanca Gomez.
Okay, so Ms. Gomez is going to speak as a member of the public. Welcome, Ms. Gomez.
So I want to seek clarification because not only can we not hear what Deborah Jones, the current appointed mayor, is saying, there's a lot of breakage. So there's a lot of confusion. So one thing I want to clarify is on the agenda, there's an item, and the item is a user fee study. When I looked online, I did see AB 361, and in my desktop where I'm at, it says revision to the agenda. So I presume that AB 361 can be commented upon, just like the user fee. So I just wanted to make that clear
Ms.
from
Gomez,
this perspective.
Can you hold a moment so I can confirm, Mr. DeBortnowski? I don't see AB 361 on my agenda.
Yeah, AB 361 was a revision to the agenda just with respect to the noticing of this meeting based on the fact that it is a Zoom meeting.
But it's
And
not an agenda item.
it is not an agenda item. That's correct. It's just a noticing issue.
All right,
Okay, so,
Ms.
okay,
Gomez,
so
item number 1.
okay, so it's always really important when we have these meetings and we're asking these questions, I guess, to bring clarity. Because if this is not an emergency meeting and we have people believing it's an emergency meeting and it's within the guidelines, I think it merits clarification from the beginning because there is a lot of confusion. I myself am confused and I am a council member and I was noted about this about 30 days ago. So in regards to the user fee, since I can only comment on the user fee, I have several questions about the user fee, and some of the questions I'll pose are also questions that I'll be bringing up. For the user fee, it looks like it's for the benefit of the consumption of the people using public works, police, the library, and many divisions. And we don't know if the increase of costs is due to the inflation or if it's due to the COVID-19 or a combination of them. So if there's a presentation today, it would be very helpful to kind of contextualize what this user fee is. I know it's a user fee is not necessarily a tax, but it's my understanding that a user fee will impact the services and probably a lot of the goods that the city of Victorville is offering. The report that we do have doesn't necessarily state explicitly that it will be addressing all user fees and what user fees will be implemented and increased, which user fees will remain, and which user fees will probably have a subsidization based on accessibility and for the general public to be able to gain access if that were the case. So some of that clarification hopefully is expanded within the presentation if there's a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gomez.
There are no
Madam Clerk,
additional,
any other requests?
there are no additional
Okay, that
in-chamber
concludes the
speakers.
thank you. That concludes the in-chambers request to speak. Madam Clerk, I need to confirm that you can hear me all right.
I can, you just broke up for a second, but yes.
Okay, you
I would
guys
like
are right.
I would like to note, at least what I'm seeing on the screen is the signal strength on Mayor Jones' camera looks to be going in and out between red, yellow, and white. It doesn't look like it's consistently at full
Oh.
screen. This is the point. So it might
We can't
be,
have that. So I'm wondering if we take a quick break and maybe I'll move to a different room and see if I can get a better signal.
that's one option. The other option is because typically the video consumes a tremendous amount of bandwidth. It could be also another option is to, while speaking, turn off the camera.
Oh. Well, why don't let's just try that. I'll just turn off my video now and we'll just do it that way during the, you just mean my video feed, correct?
Correct.
Okay, let me try that now. Can everyone hear me better?
Yes, sounds better.
Okay,
Yes.
so I'm going to stay off so that everyone can hear me. All right, so that concludes our in-chambers request to speak. We're going to now move to Zoom requests to speak. Madam Clerk, are there any?
No, Madam Mayor.
All right, will you kindly set the timer for 30 seconds so that in case there's anyone that would like to reach out to us and comment via Zoom, this will help them if they're having difficulty.
Madam Mayor, 30 seconds has lapsed and there are no additional Zoom speakers.
All right, with that said, that concludes our public comment period this evening. We're going to move to our first business in order, which is written communications, beginning with item number 1. And this is the user fee study. Mr. Metzler, will you introduce the item? And I understand there's also a presentation.
There is a presentation. Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. This item is really intended to be an item to serve as a workshop opportunity with the council to effectively share the tremendous amount of work that has gone into to put together this report that's actually in your agenda packet. Compiling the report is a consultant working with the city, NBS, but of course, the report that they put together can't be put together without the assistance of all of the leadership team and executive team that effectively oversee the various departments that actually, for a lot of what they do, charge fees for a number of their services. And so it's been many, many years since we've actually visited the fees for service. This was an opportunity, certainly before the budget, to study and make recommendations. There isn't an action expected by the council tonight, but certainly we welcome any feedback you have as it relates to the report that you have received, along with the presentation that will actually be led by Deputy City Manager, Ms. Sophie Smith. So at this point in time, I think it'd be appropriate, Madam Mayor, to turn it over to Ms. Smith and she can lead the presentation.
That'd be terrific. Thank you, Mr. Metzler. And then council members, if you'll take notes, I don't have a hard copy of the presentation in front of me. I'm hoping that council member Gomez and Becerra do. But hold your questions until the presentation is concluded and we'll see what all we can learn from this. Oh, go ahead, Ms. Smith.
Thank you and good evening, Mayor and Council. Can we go ahead and get the slide going? All right, it's coming up. Okay, first slide, please. There we go. Okay, Mayor and Council, this is just an overview of the agenda for tonight. We will start with a brief project background, and then I will turn the presentation over to Ms. Nicole Kissam of NBS, who will give an overview of user fees. And at that point, I will resume the presentation and review some summary tables by fee type, some sample project calculations to see how what the results of the study show us. We will talk about the steps that have been taken thus far and the feedback that's been received from the public to date. And we will then talk about next steps in our process and finally conclude with comments and questions that we have the whole team available to help answer. Next slide, please. So a brief background on the user fee study. As you may recall from the DIF workshop that was held back on March 29th, staff spoke of 3 projects that were actually initiated in October of 2019. Those were the cost allocation plan, the citywide user fee study, which we are speaking of tonight, as well as the DIF study. The projects were originally planned to take about a year, but we have experienced some significant delays due to the COVID-19 pandemic. As the city manager mentioned, there are quite a few staff members that are involved in putting together the information and data that was necessary to provide to the consultant to be able to study the true cost of service. And many of those staff members wore different hats during the pandemic. So there was significant delay due to the pandemic. And also we had some reorganization and staffing changes that also led to a delay. So now to talk about how the cost of service is established and fees and fines in our state, I am going to turn it over to Ms. Nicole Kissam from NBS.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, and Victorville community and Victorville staff. Just checking my audio and video. Am I coming through clearly? All right, seeing some head nodding is great. Okay, so I'm just going to take you through about 6 slides of the key aspects of the approach to the project, some of the legal parameters, and the basic steps in a fee calculation, and also kind of lead into the overall discussion about how to set fees once we sort of know the cost of providing services. So what you're looking at here is just kind of a recognition that there's a lot of different types of fees and charges in California, and they are very clearly defined by various statutes and laws. And the ones that we're focused on for the purposes of this study are commonly known as fees for services or cost recovery based user fees. So the fees that we're discussing tonight and the fees that we've studied are really limited by law to recovering no more than the cost of providing the service. And a good example of that is a standard building permit. There are some fees in this study where we may have looked at the cost of providing the service, but the actual fee that the city can implement is capped, what we call capped or set by the law. So in the law, it may say no more than 10 cents per page for a certain type of copy charge, or no more than $25 for this or that service. Then there are certain types of fees and charges that are defined either as fees or as taxes under what we call Proposition 26, which amended the California Constitution, and Proposition 218, which we won't get into that this evening. It doesn't necessarily influence how we've analyzed these fees. And finally, fines are not fees, and I think that's good to point out here that we have not done any analysis of fines or penalties that are used for through the citation process or otherwise. Next slide. So in California, cities impose user fees and regulatory fees for services and activities they provide through provisions of the state constitution. Article 13C, Section 1, generally states that a fee may not exceed the reasonable cost of providing the service or performing the activity. And it also includes 7 exceptions or 7 definitions for when a charge qualifies as a fee versus a tax. The city's purpose, and any city's purpose in general, for conducting user fee study on a routine basis is to ensure that fees don't exceed the costs of providing services, and also to provide an opportunity to realign fee amounts either up to that cost of service or according to localized cost recovery policy. So really what we're looking at in this process is 2 major steps. The step that took the longest here is to gather the data and the information and go through the process to understand the full cost of providing services. And now we're entering into the phase of where council has the opportunity to set those fees according to local policy. Next slide. So we have presented you with a pretty substantial report. It's about 240 pages long, and it covers 18 different fee programs within the city's organizational structure. So to give you the highlights or a summary of that report, there's going to be 3 phases of analysis that we follow as the industry standard. One is the cost of service analysis. So There we take data and we compile that into the full cost of services, both on an annual level, an hourly level, and an individual fee level. And once we have that translated into the cost of service at the individual fee level, we then can compare that to the existing fee charged by the city to show whether or not that fee is under recovering, appropriately recovering, or over recovering the cost of providing that service. And then from there, we talk about how to establish fees. So where are we going to set updated fees in relation to that exercise? Next slide. This is kind of a graphic or a display here for purposes of understanding the basic math behind an individual fee calculation. So in the first set of brackets here, what you're seeing is what we call the total cost of providing services. So that's going to include all types of direct and indirect costs that are reasonable and eligible for recovery through fees for services. We divide that amount by the total hours worked in a year, so annual costs divided by annual hours worked, and we multiply that by the level of service provided for each individual fee for service. And that is, in essence, how we establish the maximum fee amount. There's a lot of data gathering and discussion that goes into developing that maximum fee amount, but this is the basic math. So to show that in an example, for those of you that are numbers people, you've got a personnel budget of $200,000. This is not a Victorville example. This is just a demonstration. We've got $50,000 of operating costs. We've identified $75,000 of overhead. So the total costs are $325,000 per year divided by the total staff hours available in this particular division, which produces an hourly rate of $130. And for whatever service this particular example would apply to, we've established that it takes about 4 hours to provide the service, and that yields a maximum fee amount of $520. This is just meant to be a simple display or demonstration of how the fee calculation works. Next slide. So I think the most important takeaways from the fee study report and from the process that we've gone through here is just to remember that fees can't exceed the cost of providing services. And the reason that we do studies like this is to keep on top of the difference between what we're charging versus what the cost of service is. Fees vary. So when you start looking through the report and you look through the appendices, you're going to see a lot of different types of fees. You're going to see what we call flat or fixed fees, where it's just a single fee for a single service. It's one transaction, and that's the fee. Sometimes you'll see it tiered based on criteria like project cost or project size or project effort. And some fees you'll see are deposit based, where an initial amount is paid up front, and then time and materials is drawn down from that, not to exceed the actual cost. So as we move forward into the rest of these slides, I would just say that really it all comes down to the degree of the actual recovery of costs on an individual fee level and in total is a policy decision for the council to make. And there's a lot of considerations that'll be very local and specific to Victorville. And some of the most common ones would be, for the service received, what's the degree of private benefit? And that's going to be different for different fee programs. What is the appropriate cost recovery level according to City Council's opinion? How are we competitive or not based on where we set our fees? How much of an increase are we looking at? And also, one item that's not up here that I should mention, sometimes there's a public safety consideration where you want people to come in and get permitted or pursue a certain type of service. And that may influence where you set your fees. So what the fee study does again is it establishes the full cost of providing services, and it compares that to the revenue collected on average from current fees for services. And the gap here, the red arrow, is what we're talking about in terms of getting ready to close some of that, not close any of it, close all of it. That's the conversation that we're entering now as in this phase of the project. Next slide. So what the results are in the report on an annual level is that fees currently collected, revenue for current fees per year is about 4.5 million. And the study identified 8.8 million in costs of providing services. So therefore, there's about a 4.3 million deficit or under recovery for services provided. That's about a 50% cost recovery ratio across all the services that we studied here. And that's, you know, we see varied results across the state. And, you know, if you look into the detail, you're going to see some fees go up, some fees come down, some fees are about right. This is a typical result of any fee analysis. Next slide. And Sophie, I think here, did you want me to keep going or should I pass this back to you guys?
I'll take it now, Nicole. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah.
Next slide, please. Okay, as Nicole mentioned, there were 18 areas of the city where each of their user fees were studied. This slide shows a list of all of the areas that were involved in the study. The summary table here shows by each department or division or area, what on average they're recovering in terms of what percentage they're recovering is in terms of cost recovery. So for example, for building, it's the third line down, you can see that at the current fees, building is estimated to bring in about $1.4 million in revenue. Based on the study and at 100% cost recovery, that number would be anticipated to jump to the 2.47 figure on that line item. So the calculation shows that there is an additional $1 million or so to collect potentially at 100% cost recovery. And so they are currently collecting at 59% of cost recovery. And so the slide shows for each area. On average, you see that across the city, there's about a 51% cost recovery that's currently being charged for the current fees. Next slide. So as Nicole mentioned, the report and the full report is included in the agenda and is online as well. It's about 250 pages long. About 200 of those pages involve the appendices, which list every single fee that we charge, user fee that we charge at the city. So what we did was brought a couple of kind of common examples for the council to see. So we will start here on this slide with a typical code compliance case. As you can see, the current fee that is composed of those three areas there is $77. Based on the study, the 100% cost recovery would be $572. So currently we're collecting about 13% of our cost on that type of activity. Just below are some examples from the business license area. So for a new commercial business, the current fee is $165. Based on the report, the 100% of cost of service would be $367. So we're currently recovering at about 45%. On the opposite end, for out-of-city applications for contractors, we're currently charging $120. And based on the study, the true cost of service is $80. So we're collecting at 150% of cost recovery, which means based on the study, that fee will have to be reduced. Next slide, please. Here's a few more examples. One is a animal control enforcement case. And as you can see, the current fee combined is $110. The study shows that $295 is the actual cost of service. So in that example, we're at 37% of cost recovery. For our dog license fees, we currently charge $10 for an altered dog, $25 for an unaltered dog. Based on the study, the cost of service is $48 for each of those licenses. So the various cost recovery percentages are 21% and 53%. Next slide. One more? Thank you. So here are a couple of examples of how our development type fees fared in the study. So here's an example of a single family home, 2,000 square feet. Under the current fee structure, we would collect $2,259 in fees. And based on the study, we should be collecting $2,454. So we're pretty close to what we should be recovering there. And just for comparison purposes, the staff provided a comparison to the city of Hesperia and the comparison to the city of Fontana. Next slide. Here's an example of a 16,506 square foot office building. So in that case, the current fee is $11,316. The cost of service study shows that we should be collecting $7,716. So the components of certain components of that fee will have to actually go down. Next slide. Here's an example of a 461,000 square foot distribution warehouse. The current fees that we charge are $133,000. The based on cost of service for this particular type of development and under the new proposed 100% cost recovery for this item, that whole related fee would be reduced to $21,683. So you see a significant reduction there, primarily on the permit side, based on the method that was previously used or currently used for calculating the fee. It has to do with square footage, where the cost of service study shows us the actual time involved in processing that permit. Here are just a few examples on the land development engineering side. So for a right-of-way permit for a drive approach, you can see the current fee that we charge is $284. Based on the survey, 100% cost recovery would be $868. And collectively, we're about 33% at existing cost recovery for that example. Here's an example of a right-of-way permit for new construction. So under the current fee structure, the total would be $17,352. For the cost of service at 100%, that new fee would actually be reduced to $15,200. And as you look at the individual line items, you can see that as it relates to the water improvement plan check line item and the water inspection permit fee, those are over 200% of existing cost recovery. So those are the components that need to be reduced to the true cost of service, which will have an overall impact of lowering that permit fee. Another example, in this case, you can see as you look at the individual line items, I'm sorry, this is a right-of-way permit for a subdivision, that again, the improvement plan check, there we are currently recovering at 529% of cost recovery. So that line item specifically will have to be reduced, as well as anything over 100%. So the construction and excavation inspection, the water improvement plan check. And so although the current fee is $314,652, the new fee would be $209,092 approximately, based on the information we have of the cost recovery associated with that type of permit. Another example similar to the first, where the current fee is $297, based on the study, 100% cost recovery would be $946. So we're only recovering at 31% in that particular example. That was for streetlight permit. And finally, for a backflow permit, the current fee is $5,341. Based on the study, the new cost for that type of permit would actually be about half, which is $2,463. And you can see the reason within certain line items, the water improvement plan check again, the water inspection permit fee, were well, even the tech fee, were well over 200% for each of those line items. So as each of those line items are reduced to the true cost of service, the overall permit fee would also be reduced. So where we are in the study and with the study is before the workshop tonight, we did distribute a draft of the study back on April 5th to the stakeholder groups. Those were commercial real estate, industrial real estate, various members of the development community, the BIA, et cetera. Additionally, the study was posted to the city's website on April 5th, and a hero image was added to the landing page of the website, including inviting everyone that went to the website to take a look at the study and provide any comments. We also held a Zoom stakeholder meeting on April 13th of 2022. And then the following day, we posted that stakeholder meeting for anyone that could not participate live on April 14th. Thus far, based on that outreach, we have received pretty limited feedback. The primary feedback was a request to delay the user fee study adoption and implementation, as we are also in the middle of diff fee studies. So the request specifically that we received was to delay this study a little further. So finally, as far as next steps, we have the workshop tonight. We will publish the staff recommendations, the final study, and all of the fees will be put into a master fee schedule. It'll be 100+ pages to cover each fee type. And that's scheduled currently for May 27th. And then we will have the public hearing, including a request to adopt the staff recommendations at the June 7th, 2022 City Council meeting. As you may recall, that's also the date scheduled to make the final adoption recommendations and adoptions for the diff fee schedule. So with that, we have the all of the city staff either in here in person or on Zoom, as well as Nicole from NBS to answer any specific questions that the council may have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Smith. All right, Madam Clerk, will you please read the recommendation?
Any direction given is at the discretion of the city council.
Thank you. All right, since tonight is presentation is mostly intended for informational purposes, and we're going to have follow-on meetings related to this directly. To move forward, I'm now going to take not only questions for clarification, but comments from council members. And we're going to begin this evening with Mayor Pro Tem Irving.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Because this is an informational item, at this point, I'm just taking in the information and digesting it. It looks like we are working to make sure that we can recover the cost of services that we provide. So I'll just take it in the information until I have absorbed everything, and at a later date I'll have questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. All right, Member Gomez, questions, comments?
Yes. So I'm a bit concerned because the way I'm looking at all of the.
Oh, wait, hold on. I need to pause for just a moment. So Member Gomez, at this point, you can ask questions, but you may not comment per se because you already spoke as a member of the audience, but you can ask questions if you'd like.
Okay, so where is the true and or the full cost provided using the user fee and the established revenue recoveries?
That's actually identified throughout the study that was actually shared with you. We could be more precise if you wanted to talk about a different cost for different department, but it's summarized fairly well in the report.
I don't see it. That's why my question was there. But if you can't address it, it's very vague the way you're responding. So I wanted to know the true and the full cost. I think it may be embedded in a line item, but I didn't see it. I was following the presentation.
It's not one line item. It's going to be
Right,
a number of line items depending upon the department. And if you look at the report, you'll actually find summaries for each department. You'll actually find a calculated cost based on a department translated into an hourly rate. And that differs depending upon the department because there's different metrics that go into the staffing levels of those departments.
Okay, I don't see it in the report. My next question is, what other types of fee structures were available but not considered for one reason or another?
I don't know if there are any other types of fee structures to consider. This was a fee study, really considered actual cost, direct and indirect, which are common terms used, and then evaluated the actual cost based upon the time it takes to do a certain function.
So I'll give you an example. So formerly, we weren't using the process time allotted for what it took to create a process. We were using square footage. So that presumes that there is different ways of looking at how we would create the study. So that brought to mind, okay, so then what other options were there if we decided on commercial properties, we're no longer going to base it on square footage, but instead we're going to base it on the time it takes to do that work allotment.
Well, it does depend upon the nature of what it is we're trying to charge and for what service. So there's different metrics depend upon the nature of the work.
So those are the kinds of options that I wanted to see. Why, if we didn't use them, what was the reason?
We did use them. They're actually all summarized in the report.
But we didn't use them. That's why NBS had to come in. I'm thinking formally, we were doing a massive change of some areas being overly charged, like $2,000 versus it should have been this amount, and it's a lot of money. So that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, so our research indicates that the last time a citywide user fee study was done was around the year 2000 or 2001.
Okay.
So this current team doesn't exactly have all the answers to how certain fees were developed, but the purpose of this study that we're doing as this management team is to make sure that we're in compliance with the California Constitution that Nicole mentioned earlier, where we should be recovering a reasonable cost that's associated with our services. And so that is the only method we considered in terms of developing these user fees.
Okay, since I only had 2 minutes and I'm not going to be allowed to do more than that, my next question is going to be, how are we ensuring participation and accessibility by ensuring that some of our services or all of the services are subsidized by those individuals that may not have the income but still benefit from those items, which could be library, could be like preschool, could be for people with autism. I mean, they could be under the poverty level line, and so we don't want to cut them off. So what are we doing to ensure that there's equity and fairness, but also subsidization so that these families or groups are able to still benefit from
Your time is
this
up.
user fee? Thank you.
I think, Madam Mayor, and that's in part what this type of meeting is for, this type of workshop where we share with you the results of the study. And there may be certain areas that the council has opinions about, to where the council believes it may be beneficial to subsidize certain areas as opposed to other areas. An example, and I'm not recommending this, but an example may be in the area of, say, recreation service fees for some of the programs that we offer. And it very well could be that, based upon the study report, in the study report is basically analyzing what our costs are today. And for recreation type programs, it's already generally accepted that you're not going to recover all of your costs, because you still want to maintain some certain type of affordability for your community members, your residents. And that's the kind of feedback that would be helpful for us, so that when we come back on June 7th, if there are those areas of interest or concern, we can certainly bring back, we can certainly first look at that much more closely and then bring back recommendations on the 7th.
My apologies. Thank you, Mr. Metzler. So, Councilmember Becerra, do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Metzler, you did touch on one of the questions I was going to ask. So say recreation, we do want to leave it where it's at. When do we tell you that? Now, or do we bring it up as 4, or how do we address it?
Now would be a good time if that's an area, or if there are any other areas you'd like us to look at closely. Perhaps you believe that the recommended increase, at least the recommended increase per the study, is too great, maybe too burdensome. Those would certainly be areas that we can hone in on and see if there's any opportunity to make a recommendation that's less than what's actually in the study report.
Well, that would be my recommendation, mine personally. Maybe at 10% across the board this year, another 10 next year. At least give them time to catch up to where it would need. That's my recommendation.
On the recreation
On the
side,
recreation side, all the sports, youth sport, adult sports, when they rent, like the soccer fields at Hook and everything. Okay, I did notice for PD, about time, let's go. The DUI fees, are we talking from when they pull over a stupid drunk driver by himself? They arrest him, take him to jail? Are we gonna look at from start to finish? Or are we talking when they hurt an innocent party and now we're out there 12 to 16 hours because now they have to do a full length report? And are we charging police, everybody out there, fire, and public works?
yeah, I don't necessarily expect it to be just one. If there are multiple departments providing services, then I would expect to have a cost recovery
Okay.
pursued by all those departments. But either Ms. Smith or Ms. Davidson, do you have anything more to add on maybe that example?
One of the benefits of having this report available to us is that it gives us the fully burdened cost for the different areas. And even if something isn't specifically listed in the appendice, that gives us the ability to calculate it later. So for each of those areas, we could calculate them even if it's not specifically rolled into a cost recovery fee in the appendice. But we do have mechanisms in place to capture cost recovery currently for each of those divisions.
Okay. And Ms. Smith, I just want to make sure I understood you. The last fee study we did was in 2000. So we did a study based upon wages that we were paying in 2000, based upon materials in 2000. Everything was based on 2000 wages, right?
That is what we found in our research, other than a mid-2000 recreation study that we were able to locate.
Okay.
So yes, very old.
Animal control, we were down too, but animal control is animals that I choose to keep, that if I want to keep and everything like that. So the licenses and everything should be kept up, correct? Because that is what I choose. I choose to get a dog.
So yeah, what the study showed there is that, well, we have 2 different fees that we charge, one for an altered dog and one for an unaltered dog.
Mhm.
The true cost of service shows that both of those fees are too low.
37%.
Right. As a policy decision, different recommendations can be made. For example, on an unaltered dog versus an altered dog. For
Okay.
example, many cities will discount the license fee for an altered dog.
Okay. And for code to visit my home, there has to be an issue with my home that code got called on. My neighbors saying that I'm building a block wall or I'm doing stuff on the city right away and everything. Code just doesn't cruise around looking for stuff to go onto my property, correct? Because code is also below.
I don't want to say that all code complaints are a result of somebody calling, because we have many staff that are observant and can serve as an extension of code.
Okay.
So I don't want to just limit it to calls or complaints, but everyone's looking. That's part of the city team.
There we go. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. No further questions. Well put together, well understanding and reading through it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Member Becerra. Well, I value Member Becerra's comments, and I think they're good suggestions. I just don't know, Mr. Metzler, whether this is a a good time to give all of our input because we have at least one council member that said that she, really has a lot of this to take in and digest and will have questions in the future. So I'm thinking that this is going to be something that's going to be worked out at the next meeting or so in terms of what we're really recommending. But here's my question. One of the inputs that we got from someone was a delay in the user fees. And is there a reason? Did they cite a specific reason for that?
Yes, Madam Mayor, my understanding from their comment was because we are also in the midst of the DIF fee study where some of the fees may also increase. They were asking to basically have us phase the two studies. As we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, these studies are mainly because of the pandemic, a couple of years behind already. The last DIF study done was 2006 to 2008 timeframe, and the last fully comprehensive user fee study was done in the early 2000s. So
right, and that's what makes this so hard, because for one reason or another, the city has and councils before us have moved this down the road to where we have it now, and we're having to deal with many years of not updating our information, and it comes to quite a shock, I think, to everybody as to what we're looking at. Although I was happy to see that some of the rates actually went down, so that's good news. So with that said, Mr. Metzler, I don't know that it's reasonable to ask for direction from the council, since I know I myself need to look at the presentation that was given tonight more closely. Mayor Pro Tem wants to look more closely. I'm sure Member Gomez continues to have questions, but I do want to make sure that we're taking into consideration Member Becerra's thoughts and recommendations. So can you bring all that back to us at the next meeting for this? That's intended for this subject, I should say.
The current plan is to bring it all back on the 7th of June with actual recommendations. If you're asking for another agendized item, say at the May 17th, we can certainly put something on the agenda just to allow for additional discussion without action. We can continue as staff because we have time and it's a working effort. We're also taking a lot of stakeholder feedback still as we progress. It's really kind of a working effort between now and June 7th. We can certainly take your feedback, over the course of time, even have constructive dialogue as you share some of that feedback, whichever your preference is.
So let me just ask this, because I want to make sure that we're considering all of our council members. So at the June 7th meeting, you'll present, you will have already taken input from any other community members, etc. And presumably you might hear from some other council members, and you'll be able to incorporate those things into your recommendations.
Your time is up.
We certainly can. And in fact, that's the approach we've taken with the DIF study. We've already had a similar meeting with you on DIF. We've had continued dialogue with stakeholders. We're actually making good progress in taking a lot of that stakeholder feedback to craft a recommendation. In fact, we're pretty close already on the DIF side with our recommendations. So we could approach it the same way as we have been with DIF if the council so chooses, to where we just continue to work constructively over the course of time until we get to the 7th with our final recommendation, or we can have another discussion at the 17th, I'm sorry.
Okay, so knowing that my time is up, however, I do have a question in order to continue to facilitate this item. Mr. Metzler, do you have a preference? I know our May 17th agenda is pretty full. Do you think it would be good for us to have something on the 17th, or is June 7th good?
I believe June 7th is fine amongst us individually. We meet enough, we have enough opportunities to meet, and we can certainly discuss this. I can make some additional outreach to you all. to discuss any additional feedback you have. It certainly works well with staff, but of course, you know, we'll follow your direction if you wanted to make it a public conversation.
Okay, and Mayor Pro Tem Irving, I see your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. I think my question was answered. How do you want, are we gonna, when we give our feedback, will we do this in a public forum? Should I just reach out to the city manager? And also my train of thought is, you know, in terms of the vision for the future of our city and, you know, in a way to make sure that we remain competitive and, you know, we're the city that, you know, I don't know how to say it, but you know, where all the action is, this is a good place to come. I am, is this, I'll just meet with the city manager because I have some thoughts. I'm in agreement with Councilwoman Becerra, but I have some additional thoughts about fees as we move forward. So I'll reach out to him privately and if we have a conversation in a public forum, I will, you know, of course, I will bring up the same issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. All right, I don't see anybody else's hand raised that has additional time to speak. So with that said, then we'll just look forward to hearing about this again on June 7th. And with that said, that concludes our business for this evening. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
I don't understand. You guys give us read it. I don't get it.